And I saw the heaven having been opened, and look, a white horse, and the one sitting on it being called Trustful and True. And in rightness he judges and makes war, but his eyes as a flame of fire, and on his head many diadems, having a name having been written that no one knew except himself, and having thrown around himself clothes having been dipped in blood, and his name has been called the Word of the God. And the armies in the heaven were following him on white horses, having put on themselves white clean linen. And from his mouth travels out a sharp sword, that in it he might hit the nations. And he himself will shepherd them in an iron rod, and he himself walks the winepress of the wine of the fury of the anger of the God, the all-strength. And he has on his clothes and on his thigh a name having been written, King of Kings and Master of Masters. And I saw one messenger having stood in the sun, and he shouted in a great sound, saying to all the birds, the ones flying in middle heaven, Come, bring together into the great dinner of the God, that you might eat the flesh of kings, and flesh of rulers of 1,000, and flesh of the strong, and flesh of horses, and the ones sitting on them, and flesh of all, both free and slaves, and small and great. And I saw the wild animal and the kings of the earth with their armies, having been brought together to make war with the one sitting on the horse and with his army. And the wild animal was captured, and with him the false spokesman, the one having done the signs before it, in which he deceived the ones having received the mark of the wild animal and the ones worshiping his image. The two were thrown living into the lake of the fire, the one of burning sulfur, and the remaining were killed from the sword, the one having gone out from the mouth of him, the one sitting on the horse. And all the birds, were satisfied from their flesh. And I saw a messenger coming down from the heaven, having the key of the bottomless and a great chain on his hand. And he held the dragon, the ancient snake, who was slandering the adversary, and he bound him 1,000 years and threw him into the bottomless, and closed and sealed upon him, that he might not still deceive the nations until the 1,000 years were completed. After these, it is necessary for him to be loosed a small time. And I saw thrones, and they sat on them, and judgment was given to them. And the souls of the ones having been beheaded on account of the testimony of Jesus, and on account of the word of the God, and who worshiped not the wild animal nor his image, and they received not the mark on their forehead and on their hand. And they lived and were kings with the Christ 1,000 years. The remaining of the dead, they lived not until the 1,000 years were completed. This is the first standing up. Fortunate and holy, the one having part in the first standing up. On these the second death has no authority, but they will be priests of the God and of the Christ, and they will be king with him 1,000 years. And when the 1,000 years were completed, the adversary will be loosed from his prison, and he will go out to deceive the nations in the four corners of the earth, the Gog and Magog, to bring them together to the war, whose number of them is as the sand of the sea. And they went up the width of the earth, and they circled the barracks of the holy ones, and the city, the one having been loved. And fire from the heaven went down and ate them up. And the slander, the one deceiving them, was thrown into the lake of the fire and sulfur, where also are the wild animal and the false spokesman. And they will be tormented day and night into the ages of the ages. And I saw a great white throne, and the one sitting on it, from the face of whom fled the earth and the heaven, and no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, the great and the small, having stood before the throne. And small books were opened. And another small book was opened, which is of the life, and the dead were judged from the things having been written in the small books by their works. And the sea gave the dead in it, and death and Hades gave the dead in them. And each was judged by their works. And the death and Hades were thrown into the lake of the fire. This is the second death, the lake of the fire. And if anyone was not found having been written in the book of the life, he was thrown into the lake of the fire. And I saw a new heaven and new earth, for the first heaven and first earth went off, and the sea is no more. And the holy city, the new Jerusalem, I saw coming down from the heaven from the God, having been prepared as a bride, having been adorned for her man. I heard great sound from the throne saying, "Look, the tent of the God is with the humans, and he will tent with them, and they themselves will be his peoples, and the God himself with them will be their God. And he will wipe off every tear from their eyes, and the death will not still be, nor neither mourning nor shout nor pain will still be, because the first went off." And the one sitting on the throne said, "Look, I make everything new." And he says, "Write, because these words are trustful and true." And he said to me, "They have become. I myself am the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the completion. To the one thirsting I will give from the spring of the water of the life as a gift. The one conquering will inherit these things, and I will be to him God, and he himself will be to me son. But to the cowards and untrustful ones, and ones abominating, and murderers, and sexually immoral ones, and druggists, and idol servers, and all the false ones, their part is in the lake, the one of burning fire and sulfur, which is the second death." And one from the seven messengers of the ones having the seven bowls, being full of the seven last blows, came and he spoke with me, saying, "Come, I will show to you the bride, the woman of the Lamb." And he carried me off in spirit on a hill great and high, and he showed me the city, the holy Jerusalem, coming down from the heaven from the God, having the splendor of the God. The light of her is like stone most valuable, as jasper stone, sparkling like crystal, having a wall great and high, having 12 gates, and on the gates 12 messengers, and names having been written on them, which are the names of the 12 tribes of the sons of Israel. From east 3 gates, and from north 3 gates, and from south 3 gates, and from west 3 gates. And the wall of the city has 12 foundations, and on them 12 names of the 12 delegates of the Lamb.